The gavel came down at $45, and the biggest man at the auction laughed loud enough to scare the crows off the fence line. Nobody bid against the old welder. Nobody wanted to. The thing sitting on the hay wagon was a steel strongbox, 94 pound of it, and the lid had been forge-welded shut all the way around. Not rusted shut, not stuck, welded. Somebody had heated that seam to a sparking white and hammered it closed on purpose, inch by inch, until the box and its lid were one piece of iron. The old man paid his money in worn bills, folded once. He did not smile. He did not explain. He just laid one scarred hand flat on the lid, the way you'd rest a hand on a coffin. It was a Saturday, the 6th of October, 1979, in Harlan's Mill, Missouri, 1,140 people, one feed store, one diner. The auction was held on the Voss property on Cutter Road, where the estate of Elmer Voss, blacksmith, was being sold off piece by piece under a sky the color of dishwater. The good anvils went early and went high. The tongs went in bundles. And by 2 o'clock, the only thing left that nobody wanted was a strongbox. It sat at the end of the wagon with a chalk mark on its flank that said scrap, $45. 94 pounds, the auctioneer announced. No key, no hinge, no way in. Boys, it's a boat anchor with corners, he said, and waited for a bid. The man who raised his hand was Ray Coulter, and everyone in that county knew him, even the ones who pretended not to. He was 71 years old that fall, and he was the last certified master welder in a county that used to have 9 of them. He stood 5'8" in his boots, and he moved the way careful men move. Nothing wasted, nothing sudden. He wore a flat denim work cap gone pale at the crown, a light blue chambray shirt worn white at the elbows, and a dark canvas jacket with a burn hole in the left cuff he had never bothered to patch. His eyes were a pale gray, steady, and they did not move fast. They had spent half a century reading heat colors in dark shops. But it was his hands you remembered. The backs of them were mapped with little white burn scars, and the fingers were thick and sure and never quite straight anymore. His hands were his biography, written in scar tissue and callus, and anybody who took the trouble to read them would have known better than to laugh. The man laughing did not take the trouble. His name was Dale Purcell, 47, 260 pounds, and he ran Purcell Salvage in a state clearing, the biggest, loudest business in the county. His brand-new Ford duly sat at the gate, chrome still bright, and Dale stood in the middle of the crowd like the space belonged to him. When Ray's hand went up at $45, Dale put his thumbs in his belt and let everybody hear him. "Well, look at that," he said. "Ray Coulter's gone and bought himself a boat anchor." He turned a slow circle, so the crowd got the benefit of his grin. 94 pounds of nothing, welded around more nothing. "Tell you what, boat anchor. When you get tired of it, I'll give you $3 for the scrap weight. That's charity now." And the crowd laughed. Not because it was funny, because Dale laughed, and Dale was rich, and laughing along with a rich man is the cheapest insurance a small town sells. By supper time, half of Harlan's Mill was calling Ray Coulter boat anchor, and the name got a little louder at every stop it made. Here is what none of them stopped to ask. Elmer Voss had been a master blacksmith for 54 years. A man like that does not weld a box shut by accident, and he does not do it for fun. Forge welding a seam that long takes a full day at the fire. Flux, welding heat, hammer, repeat, and Elmer had done it in the last winter of his life, with a heart that had already warned him twice. He had spent his final steady strength sealing that box. And the thing Ray Coulter would find inside it, a little before 10 o'clock that same night, would change how the whole town remembered a dead man, and how it looked at a living one, a boy, 2 counties away, who did not yet know his own name was about to matter. Ray Coulter had been apprenticed in 1926, at the age of 18, to a German-born master named Otto Kram, in a railroad shop in Joplin that smelled of coal smoke and hot iron. Otto Kram was a hard teacher, and a fair one, and he had exactly one sermon. "A weld is a man's handwriting in steel," he would say. "Learn to read it, and no dead man is ever silent." Ray spent 40 years thinking that was just a way of talking, and 10 more learning it wasn't. He could look at a bead and tell you whether the man who laid it was tired, rushing, or afraid. Steel remembers everything you do to it, but it was a dying trade, and Ray knew it. The railroad shop was a parking lot now. One by one, the old shops went dark, and the men who could read iron the way a preacher reads scripture were carried out to the cemetery on Route 9. Elmer Voss had been the last blacksmith. Ray was the last welder. They had never been close. Quiet men rarely are, but for 40 years they had nodded to each other across auction lots, the way two old lions gnawed across a valley. Now Elmer was gone, his life sold off a hay wagon at a nickel on the dollar, and the only thing he had sealed shut was going for scrap. Ray heard the laughter. He heard the nickname being born. He bought the box anyway. Now, before I tell you what he did with it, let me ask you something. If you've ever watched a quiet, capable person get laughed at by a loud one, at work, in a family, in a room where nobody stood up, then you already know why this story matters. And you know exactly who you're rooting for. So if that's you, take 1 second and subscribe, because the loud men get enough applause already. Back to Harlan's mill. Before the crowd had thinned, Ray did the thing people talked about for weeks afterward. He crouched down at that strongbox and stayed there for 10 straight minutes. He didn't try the lid. He didn't knock on it. He took off his right glove, and he ran the pad of his thumb along the weld seam. Slow. The full length of it, all 4 sides. The way a blind man reads a page. The bead was old-style forge work. No torch, no rod, just fire and flux and hammer. The ripples were even as stitches. The corners scarf and lapped, so clean you could barely find the joints. What that seam said made the hair stand up on his arms. This was a master at the very end of his strength, laying the finest weld of his life. Slow, deliberate, final. A man does not write like that unless the letter matters. Ray stood up, knees cracking, and paid his $45. The seam had told him half the story. He meant to hear the rest of it. It took 2 young farm hands and a set of oak planks to walk the box into the bed of Ray's 1962 GMC, and the truck squatted down on its springs like a mule taking a saddle. Ray drove home at 23 miles an hour, both hands on the wheel, while Dale Purcell's dually blew past him doing 60 with a long, happy blast of the horn. Ray did not look over. Patience looks like weakness right up until the day it doesn't. And if you made it this far, stay with me. Everything up to now was the price of the ticket. What happens next is the part I've been waiting to tell you. Word got around that boat anchor Calder had 94 pounds of welded shut, nothing in his shop, and suddenly everybody in town needed a hinge fixed or a trailer tongue looked at. They came out to Ray's place on County Road E with their thin excuses, craned their necks at the strong box on his layout table, and Ray let them look and told them nothing. Walt Meese, who had run the feed store for 30 years, was the only one honest enough to just ask. He stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands and said, "Ray, $45. What's got into you?" Ray was chalking a line on a gate rail. He didn't look up. "It'll open," he said. 2 words. The whole speech. Walt waited for the rest, understood there wasn't any, and drove to town. And by Friday, Dale Purcell was telling the story at the diner with his own improvements. In Dale's version, Ray had paid $90 and had tried a crowbar and cried. Dale told it loud, and the diner laughed on schedule. That is how noise works. It fills a room fast and costs nothing. But out on County Road E, in a shop lit by 1 bulb, an old man sat reading a weld seam of flashlight, supper going cold, in no hurry at all. Iron does not answer to noise. It never has. Iron answers to heat and to patience, and to the man who knows which one to use first. Now I have to tell you about the dead man, because this story was as before it was anybody's. Elmer Voss was born in 1899 and swung his first hammer at 14. For 54 years, his shop on Cutter Road forged hinges and hooks and wagon hardware for 3 counties, and no man ever claimed Elmer Voss short him an ounce of iron or a minute of work. He buried a wife in 1961 and a son in 1968 on a wet highway outside Rolla, along with the son's wife, leaving 1 small boy, Tobias Voss. Toby, after 1968, the whole of Elmer's family on this earth. His mother's people took him in 2 counties east, in Delwood, where his aunt raised him on a waitress's wages. But every summer from the age of 9, Toby came to Cutter Road, and Elmer taught him the fire. By 14, the boy could keep a clean fire free of clinker, scarf 2 bars, flux them with borax, bring them to a sparking welding heat, and lapped them on the anvil so the joint disappeared. Elmer told Walt Meese once, the only bragging anyone ever heard from him, "The boy has my hands." He meant to leave the boy everything. The shop, the tools, the 11 acres, the trade. He had the deed drawn. But Elmer had a business partner. 30 years before, when money was short, he had taken a loan from a scrap dealer named Emmett Purcell, Dale's father. And for 30 years, Emmett had held a small paper interest in the Voss property and resented that it was small. When Elmer Voss was found dead in his shop in February of 1979, on his stool, facing the cold forge, alone, Emmett was at the courthouse within the month, and Emmett produced a paper, a partnership agreement, dated years back, signed, it appeared, by Elmer Voss, passing the entire property to Purcell family on Elmer's death. The signature looked right. The stamp looked right. The judge was old, and the docket was full. Toby Voss was 15 years old when the forge went silent. 15 and 2 counties away, and poor. His aunt took the paper to an honest lawyer in Delwood, who told her the truth. Fighting a signed, stamped document would cost $8, maybe $10,000. She had $140. The law is an expensive country for a poor person go looking for justice in, and most of them never even get across the border. So the Purcells took the shop. And in October, Emmett's son Dale, grinning, thumbs in his belt, auctioned off Elmer Voss's whole life to pay himself for owning it. Every hammer sold. Every anvil sold. The only item nobody wanted, the one thing chalked down to scrap, was a strongbox the old man had spent his last strength welding shut. The forger's son laughed it off his own wagon for $45. Sold it to the one man in 3 counties who could read what was written on the seam. Ray did not open the box the first night, nor the second, nor the third. For 3 evenings he studied it. The town thought the job was breaking in, and the job was nothing of the kind. A cutting torch in a fool's hands would have had that lit off in 20 minutes, and filled the box with flame, slag, and burning paper. Ray had seen the weld. He had felt the care in it. And on the second evening, sitting on his stool with his coffee gone cold, the truth of the thing finally came to him whole, and he said it out loud to the empty shop. "A man does not seal a box like that against weather," he said. "He seals it against people. Against a Purcell with a pry bar and a courthouse paper." Elmer had known exactly who would come picking through his shop, and he had built the one lock that man could never open. No keyhole, no combination, nothing to force. A lock made of pure skill, answerable only by pure skill. The last conversation of Elmer's life, addressed in handwriting only one living man in that county could read. On the 4th night, a little before 9 o'clock, Ray replied. He did it the way Otto Kram had taught him in 1926, beginning with the ritual: sweep the floor, fill the quench bucket, hang the fire blanket on the rail, check the gauges on the oxygen and acetylene bottles, set the regulators 15 pounds and 7, and test the striker twice. He had marked his cut with soapstone along the outside shoulder of Elmer's weld, a kerf width away from the seam itself, because you do not cut through another man's best work if you can help it, and because the lid had an inner lip that would catch the slag before it ever reached inside. He knew that because he had spent 3 nights learning this box the way you learn a psalm. He lit the torch. The flame feathered, and he trimmed it to a neutral cone, and he began at the corner, moving left to right, slower than any young man would believe a cut could go. The steel went red, then orange, then gave way before the cone in a thin, bright curve. Sparks die in a low orange fan on the swept floor. They did not shake, and they did not hurry. Down one side, rest. Down the second side, listening. Because a cut talks, it hisses different over a void than over solid stock, and this one hissed hollow and clean, which meant the lip was doing its work and nothing inside was burning. The third side, the fourth. At 17 minutes before 10 o'clock, the last half-inch of steel let go, and the seam released all around with a sound like a held breath finally letting go. Ray shut off the torch. And then, this is a measure of the man. He stood there and did nothing at all for the better part of 20 minutes, while the cherry red line around the lid faded to gray, because reaching into hot work is a young man's mistake. And Ray Coulter had not been a young man since Hoover was president, when the steel would take his bare palm. He set a pry bar under the lip, eased the lid, and lifted it away. Inside, the box was clean and dry as a bank drawer. Elmer had lined it with wool blanket. On top of the wool lay 3 things, stacked in order, and Ray took them out one at a time under the work light. The first was a flat bundle of documents, tied in wax string. On top was a recorded warranty deed conveying the shop, the tools, and 11 acres on Cutter Road to the bias Elmer Voss, the real one, dated 8 months before Elmer died. Under it lay something better, a sworn witness, notarized statement, signed by Elmer and by 2 witnesses, one of them a retired county clerk, declaring that Elmer Voss had never in his life signed any agreement passing his property to Emmett Purcell, that the partnership paper Emmett held was a forgery built on a Trey signature, and naming the date, the loan amount, and the payoff receipt, which was pinned right there, brittle and stamped paid in full, 1954. 25 years, Elmer had kept that receipt. Quiet men keep everything. Ray read it twice under the bulb, and his jaw went tight, and he understood at last why a dying man spends his final month at welding heat. The second thing was wrapped in oilcloth and tied like a parcel, and when Ray's hands took the weight of it, they knew before his eyes did. Cash, a brick of it, banded in rubber gone stiff with age. 50s and 20s and hundreds in careful order. The savings of a man who had watched banks fold in 1931 and never fully trusted a marble lobby again. Ray counted it twice, touching only the edges. $11,340. A blacksmith's whole life. $1.50 at a time. The third thing was an envelope. On the face of it, in a draftsman's careful pencil, Elmer Voss had written, "To the man with patience enough to open this." Ray sat down on his stool. It was past 10 o'clock now, and the shop was so quiet he could hear the cooling steel tick. He opened the envelope with his pocket knife, and he read a dead man's handwriting. Not the steel this time, but the pencil. If you are reading this, then you did what no one in a hurry ever could. And that tells me most what I need to know about you. You read the seam before you cut it. So you and I are already acquainted, whatever your name is. Everything in this box belongs to my grandson, Tobias Voss, of Delwood. The papers will tell you why I could not leave it out in the open. A man I once trusted has a paper with my name on it that my hand never wrote, and I am too old and too near the end to fight in the courtroom. So I have put the truth where his kind can never reach it. His kind weighs iron. He has never once read it. Take it to my boy. Tell him the fire is his, and tell him it was never really out. I ask your pardon for the trouble of the weld. I made it the best one of my life, because a man's life is not the noise his partner makes over his grave. It is the one true thing he troubled to seal up tight. Ray Coulter sat with that letter a long time. The clock over his bench said 11 before he moved. Then he folded it back into its envelope, packed the documents and the money into a canvas tool bag, set the bag in the truck cab beside him for the night, like a passenger, and went into the house. He did not sleep much. Men who have just been handed another man's whole life generally don't. At 7 the next morning, Sunday, Ray drove 2 counties east of Delwood, 51 miles at 50 miles an hour, and found the house, a rented frame place with boys splitting kindling in the side yard with an accuracy that would have told Ray whose grandson he was even without the name. Ray parked, took off his cap, and carried the bag up the walk with his cap in his hands. The aunt came to the door with flour on her wrists. Ray said 3 sentences, more or less the fewest that would carry the load. "Ma'am, my name's Ray Coulter. Elmer Voss left some things for Toby, and it's all in this bag. Papers on top. You want to read them sitting down." He set the bag inside the door, nodded to the boy in the yard, and was backing out of the driveway before the aunt got the string untied, because he was not going to stand there and be thanked for delivering another man's mail. What happened next happened fast. The way things do when the truth finally gets loose. The Delwood lawyer, the honest one, took one look at the recorded deed, the witness statement, and the 1954 payoff receipt, and he did not even have to file suit. He simply drove to Harlan's mill and laid photostats on the desk of Purcell's own attorney, and that man read for 10 minutes, took off his glasses, and advised his client in plain English that a forged instrument, a living witness who had been a county clerk, and a jury of farmers was a combination that ended with the word penitentiary. There was no trial. There was never going to be one. Within 6 weeks, the Purcells signed over the shop, the acreage, and every dollar the auction had brought, plus interest, with a haste of men shoveling dirt back into a hole. And Harlan's mill woke up one morning and passed the news over every fence in town. The shop was never Purcell's at all. The 15-year-old apprentice, the quiet boy who used to work the fire in the summers, was the rightful owner of the blacksmith shop, and had been all along, since before the forge ever went silent. Old Emmett Purcell did not live a year past the papers being signed. Dale hung on, but a salvage business runs on trust like any other, and nobody trusts the son of a forger who laughed while he sold the evidence. Within 2 years, Dale Purcell sold the yard, sold the shiny dually, and moved south, and Harlan's mill did not throw him a going-away supper. Somebody at the diner, nobody ever admitted who, said the line that followed him out of the county. Dale weighed iron by the pound. The old man read it. That was the whole distance between them. The forge on Cutter Road was lit again the following spring, on a Saturday in April 1980, and the first smoke out of that chimney in 14 months drew half the town, whether they laughed at Ray Coulter or not. Toby Voss was 16 by then, living with his aunt in his grandfather's house, finishing school in Harlan's mill, and every Saturday, 1 day a week, an old welder's GMC came up the drive at 8 in the morning, and Ray Coulter taught the boy what Otto Cram had taught him in 1926. The fire, the flux, the scarf, the heat, and the reading of seams. The dyeing trade had found one more pair of hands. That is all any trade ever needs. One more pair of hands. The strong box they never repaired. Toby wouldn't allow it. It sits to this day in the front window of the Voss shop, lid propped open, behind a pane of glass, with a hand-lettered card that says Elmer Voss, 1899 to 1979. He sealed it. Ray Coulter. He read it. The $11,340 went into shop and the boy's future. Every cent Ray was offered money and refused it, was offered again and refused again, and finally Walt Meese told the aunt to quit insulting the man. Some work you do for wages. Some work is the wage. One golden evening late that summer, a few folks driving past the shop saw Ray's truck stopped at the window, and the old man standing at the glass with his palm laid flat against it. The same way he'd laid on the lid of the auction, and inside, past the open box, the glow of the forge and a boy's silhouette swinging a hammer in three-quarter time. Ray stood there a minute, no more. Then he got in the truck and drove home at 23 miles an hour, because some men hurry and some men arrive, and he had always known which kind he was. 94 pounds. $45. One thumb on a seam, reading a dead man's handwriting while a rich man laughed at the price. So now it comes to you, the way it always does at the end. Picture that gray October Saturday. The crowd, the chalk mark, the loud man coining a nickname for his own entertainment, and under your thumb, if you dare to crouch down and put it there, a well-beat even as stitches, laid by a dying master with the last steady strength in his hands. If you felt that seam under your thumb, would you have paid the $45 and carried the laughter home with the box? Or would you have laughed along with the loud man? Be honest, because that auction happens somewhere every single day, and the boxes are not always made of steel.